Hello, and welcome back to Energetically You. I'm your host, Megan Swan. I am a wellness and mindset coach. I specialize in stress management, detoxing, all sorts of mindful practices, meditation, yoga, plant-based living, and finding your joy. All those things and more. Today, I had the honor of interviewing Beate Sifkovits. I am so bad with names, my goodness. She is an award-winning mindset coach. She helps women turn their passion into a profession and become all boss. Spending over 10 years on self-discovery and working with the best practices, tools, and thought leaders to discover how to unlock the human potential. Beate decided to leave the corporate world to follow her passion. We touch on this in the interview, and to me, it's such an inspiring story because she took that leap to leave the corporate world before she knew where she wanted or needed to land. She just took that leap, and I find that sort of really inspiring. She now applies her experience to help women follow their own path based on their strengths, values, and vision, and finally do what they love and get paid for it handsomely. You can find Beate on Instagram and LinkedIn. I will share all of the links in the show notes. Let's dive in. Hi there, welcome back to Energetically You. I have the honor of interviewing a new colleague of mine, Beate. She is normally she's in Dubai, but right now she's vacationing with her family in Austria. Thank you so much for being here. How are you?
I'm very well, thank you. It's nice to get out of the desert once in a while and enjoy nature and fresh air.
I bet. How has your trip been so far? We're right in the midst of spring break and Easter and all of those fun holidays.
It's just such a pleasure always to come and see my family, and I know I'm very lucky to be able to do that, especially with the situation that we've been finding ourselves in over the last 12 months. I know that's not possible for everyone to do, so I'm very grateful to be here, to be spending time with my family and enjoying the spring and the Easter time and family time.
Amazing. Well, can you tell us a little bit about your journey to become a mindset coach and maybe just highlight some of the major points for you when you made the transition from your corporate world job to where you are now?
I think for a long time I kind of knew what it was, but I couldn't see the wood for the trees. It was something that I've been so passionate about for so many years, and probably about 10 years I've worked so much on finding my purpose and what it is, and then it got to a point, and I had a great glamorous job, and I enjoyed it for a lot of the time, and there was lots of travel, lots of glamorous parties, great salary. But it just got to the point where I was like, all of those benefits and all of those perks don't make up for the dissatisfaction I feel on a daily basis, and the knowing inside of me that there's something else that I know I could do even better, that I know would give me so much more fulfillment than what I do now. And it's so easy to stick with that temptation of all of that glamour, all of that money, all of that, the things that I dreamt of as a teenager, traveling the world and all of these things. But then you get to a point where I'm just like, this cannot be it. And I decided to, because I'd been on this journey to find my purpose for so long, It's like, I'm not going to find it while I'm in this rat race, while I'm close to burnout, while I'm traveling all the time, not sleeping, not seeing my family, not seeing my friends. I have to give myself that time to figure out what it is that I want to do, what it is that is within me that I know I can do, but I just don't quite know what it is. And the moment, literally, I'd taken that leap, and within days of me handing in my notice, things started to all of a sudden happen. I started meeting people. People were giving me opportunities that I could have never thought of myself. It's like step by step, just kind of following the breadcrumbs. And the more space I allowed of allowing for things to evolve, to embracing the uncertainty and just seeing what happens and taking one step at a time, that's when it all kind of started coming together. And all of a sudden I saw, it's kind of really obvious. But I just couldn't see it. I didn't have that space and that mind frame to really tap into what I have within me and what I have to give. I think that's the big change that happened for me, is that I've got so much to give that's been almost like dormant in me, that allowing that time and space to come out started to really bring me alive, in all honesty. It's like really like, oh, this is what life's meant to be. This is how I'm meant to feel. It was such an eye-opener. So that's why I'm so passionate now about helping people find that and helping people create that and taking that leap. And it doesn't always have to be that massive big leap. I'm handing in my notice, I don't know what's going to happen. But even just following that inner drive and that inner question, I think that a lot of us have. It's like, I feel like there's something else out there. And honoring that and going after that, and even just small little steps can make such a huge difference in the long run. So that's why I really want to help more, specifically women, because I think men in some way already do that more, because women, I think, feel more responsible of the family, of the expectations that are put on them, when in men it's more honorable to like really go out there and make something happen. So I'm so passionate to bring that out in women, help women to really go after that and bring that to life and find that what lights them up.
Amazing. I love how you explain that. How can you think back to, I don't know, like the months leading up to you making that decision to resign? Because I've heard this story, not to minimize your story, but I've heard like similar stories, but almost always they've basically on some small level already started on that new path. Like they've discovered the new thing and they just need the courage to jump, to put all their eggs in that basket, if you will. But it sounds like you made that jump before you even really knew like where the stone you were jumping to was. So I'm like getting chills even just thinking like how that must have been really scary. Can you think back, like was there a catalyst? Like was it just like that it was getting worse where you were, or was it like an internal just like gut instinct thing? What was it?
Completely agree with you. I always thought that was going to be my journey. I always thought there was going to be something that would just start happening on the side that I would then just easily transition into and put all my eggs into that basket. And it didn't happen like that at all. So one thing that happened, and that was a massive trigger moment for me, my grandma had died about a year and a half before. And my parents were still clearing out the house, and my mum found her wallet, and I came home in the summer, and Mum was like, oh, look what we found in your grandma's wallet. And it was a picture of me, my favorite childhood picture when I was 3 years old. It was on my parents' wedding invitation, because I was invited to the wedding because I'd already been born. And it's just me, I was just the core of Wham, that 3-year-old girl with the biggest smile on her face and sparkle in her eye. And my mum gave me that picture, and I completely out of nowhere, I burst into tears. And I was like, what have I done to this little girl? I couldn't even recognize myself. I was like, that sparkle, that smile, that hopefulness that this girl embraced just had completely disappeared, and I cried for like an hour, completely out of the blue. And I was just like, oh my God, I cannot continue like this. And that was probably the biggest trigger moment. And then when I came back to work, I just really started to question everything. And then there was a lot of pressure at the time. Numbers weren't great, sales in the industry, sales is everything. I was like, I was working till 2:00 at night. I wasn't sleeping because I was having overnight red-eye flights. And I was like, what am I doing this for? I'm killing myself. I'm killing this little girl that was so excited about the world. I can't do this anymore. And then it came to a point where I was just like, it was an argument at work, and I was like, no, I'm done. And the next day I literally was like, started the conversation of, I want to leave. How can I leave? I didn't want to leave everything in a bad note either. I didn't want to just, I'm out and leave the next day. So no, I wanted to leave in a good way, in a good place. But that's kind of how the whole thing came about. And that's why I said, I think I needed to allow myself that space to get clear, to get something that I'd been so passionate about for about 10 years before. I hadn't even realized that could be something I could do as a job, as a business. I had no idea until I actually was in it. I was like, oh, okay, let's do that. It was like literally like, duh. So yeah, that was kind of my journey. But it doesn't have to be that. A lot of people are afraid of taking that big leap. I think I was so taken aback by what had happened in those 2 months. So I was like, for me, there was no other option. But I think it doesn't have to be that scary. It doesn't have to be that dramatic. If you start putting things in motion and you start listening to yourself, you start creating a vision for yourself. I think a lot of people forget that. We wouldn't get into a car without a destination in mind. We would use at least Google Maps to figure out how to get there, or unless you know the way already. But in life, so many people forget it's the same. If you don't put a destination in your head, you're going to drive around aimlessly and you're never going to get to anywhere because you don't know where you're going. And you're never going to be satisfied by where you're at because you don't know how is that in relation to where you're heading. And that's why I think a lot of people are starting to feel quite lost because they're just chasing around their own tail, driving around anywhere without a clear destination. And that's why I focus a lot of the work that I do on helping people create that vision for themselves. What is it that you actually want? What is it do you want in a year? What is it that you want in 10 years' time? How does that relate? And how can you build a roadmap towards that? So that's one of the key areas I really specialize in and help people identify and then work towards that.
Definitely. Well, I want to ask you some more questions about creating vision, but let's one last question about that moment of transition in your life, because I know I can relate on some level to, well, here's what I'm thinking as you were telling that story. And I love the story with the picture. I have a similar picture. I wasn't 3, but where I came across it one day and just had like a completely different moment it's not a picture that I hadn't seen in so many years in your case. But anyway, I wanted to ask you, because for me, sometimes it's a bit of a mental battle, or, building a certain mindset around the fact that I could look back at 20 years of my life before I had this realization and feel regret or feel like negative things, basically. Or how I've reframed it is, and I'm sure you have too, is everything that you did in that corporate job was serving you. I mean, you were doing all sorts of skills that you incorporate in your current offerings, right? And then it's made you who you are today in all the ways that you can serve your clients now. Is that something that you worked on?
100%. I don't regret even a month in my corporate career. And I think it also gave me the time to develop that skill and that knowledge that I built up over the years. 5 years earlier, I wouldn't have been ready. I wouldn't have had enough experience in trying to find it, and skill of, all the courses that I was doing as a hobby, as because I was just really interested in it. All those books I read over a 10-year time frame. I wouldn't have had that. I would have been like, okay, I'll help you do that. It needs to come from somewhere. It needs to be lived through. You need to, have learned your lessons to be able to help other people move through that as well. And from just doing one course or reading a few books, it's not really substantiated that you can actually help people transform in the same way. So I think that whole journey was absolutely necessary for me to go through that. And it was at times very painful, but that's where your biggest lessons come from as well. And also all the skills that I've learned and the connections I've made and hugely valuable, absolutely valuable. Yeah.
So when clients come to you and like they're somewhere on the cusp of this realization or readiness to make a move, how much of their current skill set or their experience do you have them sort of contemplate before they create this new vision, which is, more forward thinking?
Usually I focus with people on creating the vision first, and then see how can we make this happen. Does that mean you're going to be in your corporate job for the next 6 months, for another year? But how can we already start working towards that alongside of the corporate career? Some people are already I'm done with this. Help me out of here. Help me get properly started so I can leave this behind. And then it's probably more like bigger steps. It's more, let's make this happen kind of conversations. But other clients are very much in that, okay, I think this is what I want to do. Okay, let's clarify that. What is it specifically that you want to do, and how can we get you there slowly? So how can we start moving the needle towards that? Whereas other people are just ready to let's just go. So it really depends on where the person is and what their vision is. Some people even struggle to come up with the vision in the first place. They know they're not happy where they are, but they have never really thought of that. They've never taken the time out and really considered what their values are, what they actually want to be or do in the next 5-10 years. Because they just I was like that as well, just taking one day at a time, 1 year at a time, hope for the best. So it has to become a practice, and your brain needs to actually start learning to think that way. What is it, the future thinking? What is it that I really want? How do I see myself living? What's the type of lifestyle I want in 3 years, 5 years, 10 years, 12 months time? But we never take the time out to get really clear on that. Or we have like a vague idea. Oh, it would be quite nice to run my business. Oh, I would love to only work 20 hours a week. Or I would love to, be more flexible in my time. But we don't actually sit down. So what does that mean? What does it actually look like? And that's where a lot of the process comes from. And that's always like half the battle, finding what it is you want and then building a roadmap towards that. And that varies for each and every single client.
I understand. So can you share with us maybe one exercise or activity that you help your clients to craft their vision, or sort of, drop into a place where they are more in tune with what they want on a deeper level?
So one of the things I start with focusing on first is values, because values are our strongest driver in life, and they are really what get us up in the morning when we don't really feel like getting up in the morning. And we so underestimate how powerful they are. And it often when things in life don't go that well, whether it's work or relationships, it's down to values being compromised. Yet we are often not even aware of that. So I, as a first step, I always bring people down to what are your core values, and then run an exercise. Put music on, read a list of 200 values that just read through what jumps out, write all of them down, and then circle the 5 that really feel the most powerful to you. and then look at those 5 values and see, where are you actually living them already? Where are you really not? And how can you start changing that? How can you start putting more of your values into that? And then from there, let's build a vision. How can you build a vision that is really truly based on your core values? And that's usually the starting point, because that when you build a vision from your values, that's so much more satisfactory and so much more rewarding than anything external can ever be. That Ferrari, the house, the holidays can never be as rewarding as living a life based on your values. So that's usually the starting point for all the work I do. And I actually work with a system, so where you can, like, it's a psychometric test. When you really get your profile as well, you see it black and white after you filled out a 15-minute online form. These are your core values, and some of them you're quite aware of yourself, but others it's quite like, oh, I didn't even realize that was important to me. And how can you adjust that in your life? And that in itself makes a huge difference already.
Wow, I love that. I love how you describe that to me, because I think, or I feel that sometimes a lot of coaches, when they're talking about vision, it's sort of seems to be more of like an aesthetic or like a visual vision. You know what I mean? Like, not so much starting from a very, heart-centered initiative. It's like it starts as literally an image that you have in your mind. Maybe you work backwards to get deeper, but I think starting on the deeper level sounds so much more intuitive.
I know you're kind of talking about vision boards and all of that. For me, that's always the last step. So that's, okay, now you kind of know where your desires, your drive, your inner being, your gifts, your sparkle is coming from. How does that now look visually? That's the last bit that kind of evolves as it goes. That's why vision boards change every year. Like, everyone starts a vision board and it's different every year. But what's the core that needs to come throughout that whole process?
Definitely. So how does creating your vision play into your other work? I know you love to focus on resilience. How are those two tied, if at all?
Yeah, no, absolutely, they are tied. Because, you start with creating that vision and building the roadmap, but then you need the resilience to actually get there, to move through that. And we all know there's so much adversity that we are constantly facing. Look at the world right now, what we've just gone through. There's always external factors that are going to impact your journey, but how you deal with that is down to your resilience. You can throw your hands up, like, oh, I've tried, I give up. But how do you move past that? It's like, okay, this hasn't worked. This might have been a failure. This might have been a mistake I've made, but how do we move past it? Something external has happened, and not being thrown off track by that. And there's 8 different components within resilience that you can identify. Some of them are your strengths, some of them are your weaknesses. And how can you use your strength rather than focusing on overcoming your weaknesses, but really leveraging your strength to get you through those difficult times that inadvertently they come. And we've all been through that. That's life. There's always going to be challenges. There's always going to be setbacks. We don't want that to hold you back from going towards your vision and, crawling back into your little box and going back into your comfort zone. But how can you keep pushing the boundaries, keep stepping out of the comfort zone, taking strides toward what it is you really want? And that's where you really need resilience that helps you going, even if things are hard, even if things look like they're not going to work out, but pushing through that and pushing past that is, I think for me, it's the 2 factors: is figuring out where you want to go, build that within that, build a roadmap, and then go for it. And how can you make sure that you don't hold yourself back from getting there?
Definitely. Well, I think as humans, but also as women, like, we're so much more resilient than we probably think. And I mean, it's just oftentimes needs to be reframed, or like anything, like bringing your awareness to the aspects of your capacity to, like you say, push past things, or just like continue showing up when you don't want to show up anymore. And I'm guessing that you are able with your clients to have them look, I mean, for example, you were talking about in your corporate job, there were all these things that you like kept showing up for, even though, you know, you didn't want to, or you didn't see the value, and so it's not that you don't have the ability, but it's interesting how our modern society, like so many people feel more comfortable in that box of quote unquote security. Like if I just keep doing these things, I know that I'll have, you know, said salary or said benefits or whatever. But then it's like a whole other type of resilience when it's like you're out on your own. There isn't that corporate box of security, even though you hate the corporate box. It does provide a certain comfort zone, right?
I read this interesting quote, and I love it, and I use it quite frequently now. It's like, you can either work and make someone else's dream come true, or you can work and make your own dreams come true. The workload is probably going to be the same, but who's going to come out better at the end? Yes, you might have a couple of years, you know, the hustle, the hard work, the things where things go wrong, the failures. But at the end of the day, if you persist and you keep going, you're going to come out better at the other end, rather than spending 20 years making someone else's dream come true and really not enjoying the process, being unhappy. Yes, you might have more security, but where does that get you in the long run? Where does that get you in, you know, the end of your life, where you're going to look back to is like, I wish I had tried, or I feel like I've never really honored my gifts. I've never really lived my purpose. I'd rather have tried and failed and then decided I would go back. Personally, I don't think that's I think once you've come out of it and you've gone down that journey, you recognize, even if it's hard, you recognize that's so much more rewarding than anything else. Yeah.
Well, I think that's it's like different kinds of fear, right? Like, I mean, there's like the fear of never actually going for your dream versus like the fear of everything being on your shoulders because now you're out on your own, right? But I think, you know, probably it's a very similar weights of stress, if you will, that people carry. And it's just like, well, you being a mindset coach, right? It's just how you frame it as to whether it's empowering and exciting versus the other, you know, like can be suffocating or.
I wrote a blog post a couple of weeks ago, and it was called, what's your favorite flavor of shit sandwich? Like, you're always going to have to deal with shit. Always. Whether you work for a corporate, whether you work for yourself, you're always going to have to deal with situations that you don't want to deal with conflicts, with challenges, with shit going wrong, literally. But you choose, how do you want to come out at the end of it? Do you want to come out strong, empowered, doing it for yourself? Or do you want to come out of it at the end? It's like, yeah, so I've got a salary and the company is making even more money.
Yeah, it's all how you
choose your battle. Choose your battle. Yeah.
It's all how you frame it. So Are there techniques or, I don't know, practices that you give your clients that help them with resilience? Or how do you frame that?
So I also work with a psychometric tool that gives you, again, kind of a black and white picture of where your resilience sits amongst those 8 components, and where you sit on the scale of 1 to 10. And then we usually work on, what are your strengths? How can you use your strength? And yes, there's tools and practices for each of those 8 components, how you practice them on a day-to-day basis, and then look at the weaknesses. I prefer focusing on strength in general, but sometimes there's also, if there's a strong weakness, there's usually also, again, small practices and tools you can use to make sure that you don't let that weakness hold you back, that you don't fall into that trap of, let that stumble you over. So it's quite a analytical process to start with, and then going again into the profile and looking at where people are at and meeting them right there, and providing tools and processes specifically for that person.
Wow, your framework sounds so interesting. Is that something that you've developed over time, or is this something that you kind of integrated from your previous jobs? Sounds like you have a lot of tools and frameworks.
So there's kind of the overarching process I've developed myself by going throughout the process myself. So that's, I work in a 5-step methodology, which is firstly the vision, creating the vision, then building the action plan according to that, then looking at what's your environment? Are you actually set up for success? What are skills you need to develop? This is often where the resilience profile falls in. This is a psychometric tool that I'm a trained resilience coach as well, that I just use for that purpose. And then finally, it's that psychology, that mastering your mindset. That's often where it's so useful and helpful to have a coach, when you work with someone, to not let you trip there up, because they can call you out on the things. And I know firsthand, I have a coach, because there's things you don't see yourself, or, you talk yourself into something. You need someone to like, no, life is not like, that's not reality. You are just trapped into one type of thinking. You need to change your perspective a little bit. And that's where a coach can really, really help point that out and shift your perspective and shift your mindset. So that's kind of the 5 parts. And I have different tools that I'm trained in, and they're psychometric tools. They're, validated across, big institutes, that I use in between to leverage those different steps.
Love that. Must be why you're an award-winning coach. You want to tell us about the award that you have won?
Yeah, that was really exciting. It's a wellness award. It's a holistic wellness award. So it's all about, it's not about the mind, body, and soul connection. There was different categories about specifically body, mind, and where I fall in is the mind and soul connection. And it was a huge surprise to me that I was nominated for that. And it was a very long process, and it's about 5 steps that you had to go through to be able to get to the final round. So yeah, I'm very proud and very excited for it, and very humbled by it as well. But it was fun to even just go through the process.
Well, congratulations. That's really cool.
Well, thank you.
Do you want to tell us a little bit of what you're working on right now, or where people can find you most easily?
Absolutely. You can find me on Instagram. It's at Beate Sifkovits, so just my full name, really. I have on Instagram, I also have, if you go into my bio, I have the 5 strategies on how to start doing what you love and get paid for it. So, these are the 5 things you really need to focus on if you want to make that transition from a corporate life to becoming an entrepreneur. So I've got a 20-minute training video on that. That is free of charge. You can simply download from my profile. And I also run monthly webinars on specifically helping you guide you through that process. And I think you'll be sharing the links to that. So
definitely, we'll have all the links in the show notes. Well, thank you so much, Beate, because there is something you want to share to the woman that's, where you were 6 months before resigning, a message that you maybe would have told yourself at that time.
Just fucking do it. Not waiting, just fucking do it. Life's too short, and it's not going to get easier. Like, whether you start 3 months or 6 weeks later, earlier, a year later, 2 years, it's never going to get easier. The earlier start, the better. And like I said, I don't regret a single month of having been in my corporate world, but you've got to recognize the time when you need to take that step. Don't let those drives and those questions foster in yourselves for too long. Just do it.
Perfect.
Even if it's just small little steps, just start somewhere, anywhere. And sometimes people people say, you know, oh, I don't know what. Like clarity comes from action. Just start somewhere, and that will reveal the next step. That will give you more clarity. Just do something. Just go. Just do something.
I love that. So true. Clarity does come from action, not from overthinking.
Thinking about it. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, we'll leave it off there. Thank you so much for being here. It was an honor, and I can't wait to share this interview with the world.
Well, thank you so much for having me. It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you, as always. And I'm very honored to have been part of it. It was a great conversation. I love chatting to you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for listening to Energetically You. I hope that this episode has helped you to tune into your natural energy sources so that you feel more energized and focused throughout your day. If you enjoyed the episode, please take a second to rate and review. Each review helps us to help more ambitious women just like you accomplish their goals. Don't forget to take a screenshot, share it on social, or in your Instagram stories, and tag me at Megan Swan Wellness. See you soon.